So Shakur Stevenson just said that he didn't see anything wrong with Tank like a lot of us are saying. I personally think Tank was distracted. He had stuff going on because he clearly wasn't focused in the ring. He was letting stuff bother him, like the stuff with getting grease in his eyes from getting his hair braided, this and that. But Shakur doesn't seem to believe any of that. He feels like everybody in the sport of boxing is just making excuses for Tank Davis, and he feels like Lamont Roach is, probably going to beat him in a rematch. That's what Shakur Stevenson said. It's interesting stuff, guys. Let's break it down a little bit, give you guys my thoughts at least, and comment yours down below. But it's just interesting. It's stuff like we want to see Tank and Shakur so badly, at least I do, and I think it's such a interesting fight. I'm not gonna say I think it's gonna be a more exciting fight than maybe Tank Davis and Keyshawn would, because styles make fights at the end of the day, and Keyshawn versus Tank is a really exciting fight stylistically. But it's intriguing to see what's gonna happen between Tank and Shakur, because I see a lot of cat and mouse going down, because you have a guy like Shakur who's a southpaw versus southpaw. They're going to be somewhat toe-to-toe. Shakur uses his feet a lot. Tank uses his feet a lot. A lot of people say that Shakur Stevenson is a runner. He's a track star. He's a boring fighter. Maybe he's not the most exciting fighter the same way that everybody looks at Tank, because everybody views Tank as the most exciting fighter in the world. And, that's fair, because he's put on so many of these knockout stellar performances that leave people with their jaws on the floor. So there's no surprise to hear that people want to see Tank more than they want to see Shakur. But I always say, Shakur hasn't really had a competitive fight in my eyes. He hasn't had a fight where a guy has really given him any trouble. Now, he hasn't faced a really heavy hitter, and when he faced a decently heavy hitter against Edwin De Los Santos, he got criticized the most for that fight. So that's something you could take into account. But still, when it comes to getting the win, he's been able to do it every time, and with no problem really. But we saw Tank's last performance with Lamont Roach, where Tank didn't look his best. He looked kind of ordinary, if we're being honest. He looked beatable. A lot of people feel like Lamont Roach won. Terrence Crawford said Lamont Roach won. Shakur said that Lamont Roach won. And maybe they're a little bit biased, but a lot of people still thought that Roach pulled it off. And, Tank obviously took that knee, but I feel like in a rematch, it's going to be a completely different fight. We're going to get a different version of Tank. You could sit here and say that because Lamont Roach did so well in the first fight, he's going to do even better in the second fight. You could say that, but I feel like the room for improvement is so much more significant for Tank than it is for Lamont. I feel like Lamont already fought to not his best potential, or his fullest potential, but pretty damn close. And I think Tank was nowhere near his best form. So I feel like in a rematch, I still have to favor Tank, but maybe styles make fights, and maybe Lamont Roach just has Tank's number to an extent, but I just don't think that's the case. I feel like we're going to see a different version of Tank. And, Shakur did make me think, I'm not going to lie. I'm very respectful and intrigued by a lot of fighters, when they come to talking about other fighters in their weight class, that could potentially be fights down the line. Tank and Shakur is still the biggest fight at lightweight, and probably the biggest fight in boxing, in my opinion. That's the fight I really want to see. As big as an event as Canelo Alvarez versus Crawford is, I still want to see Shakur and Tank more. That's the more intriguing fight to me, because there's no excuses. Because Canelo and Crawford, we know that they're not fighting the best in their respective weight class. They're making a big event, and that's fine. Maybe it'll help the sport of boxing to an extent and bring more eyeballs to that singular event. But when I look at Tank and Shakur, that's a fight for the lightweight ages, because you're talking about opposing styles, and these are the top two guys in the division still. So I really want to see that fight. But realistically, I understand what Shakur is saying, because Tank didn't look that great. Tank didn't necessarily do anything different, like Shakur is saying, because Tank started slow. He just didn't get that knockout that, he always banks on, because he's a quote-unquote slow starter. But it is interesting to see, because it makes you think, is Tank really that knockout artist, or was he just fighting people that were set up for the knockout? It's an interesting topic, but I really do want to see what happens when Tank and Shakur fight each other, because these two are probably the best lightweights we're going to see, for the next 4 or 5 years. So I'd love to see it. I think it has to go down, but I'd probably, lean towards Shakur right now. But if we see a stellar performance and major adjustments from Tank, I'd probably favor Tank over Shakur because Tank fighting Lamont Roach is, in my opinion, a better opponent than any that Shakur has fought. At least in terms of who's on Shakur's level, I think Lamont and Shakur would really tell me, you know, a lot. But ultimately, I still want to see Tank and Shakur. But let me know down below what you guys think. Shakur versus Tank, should it go down, and who you guys got? But thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next boxing video. Peace.